After we just practiced our distribution or foiling, we are going to now work on factoring. If you remember from earlier in the year, we did factoring. Factoring just means what did it come from. So I'm going to give you these kind of problems, and we're going to actually find what parentheses they came from. But before we start, we want to kind of come up with an idea of how we can do that. So what we just watched was the video of how to distribute this. So if I distribute, I end up getting x squared, because I did that, plus 3x plus 5x plus 15, which gives me x squared plus 8x plus 15. You might have noticed on those problems that we just watched that it always ends up being x squared. There's a number with an x and then a number by itself. If I look here, I want to know, does this 15 have anything to do with the numbers at the beginning? So I'm kind of looking back up to here. Does that 15 come from anything? Well, if I look, isn't 3 times 5 15? Which makes sense because that's how I got that number here. I did 3 times 5. Now I want to look and say, well, what about that 8? Does that 8 come from anywhere with those numbers above? So how could I get 8 from those? Oh, it comes from adding 5 plus 3. So what we have just seen is there's this pattern that exists in all of these problems. So the pattern that I see is that it always ends up being, well, I guess let's write it this way. It always ends up being x squared plus the numbers added times x plus the numbers multiplied times x. So that's kind of the pattern that we're seeing exists there, and that's how we would unfoil or factor it, is we're trying to figure out what parentheses did it come from. Okay, so let's try one. That might make it a little easier. So if we remember, the middle number is what do they add to get, what two numbers add to get 10, and then this is what two multiply to get 10. So we kind of have to think through what multiplies to get 16. Well, I know 1 and 16 do, but that doesn't add to get 10. 1 plus 16 isn't 10. 4 and 4, well, 4 times 4 is 16, but 4 plus 4 is not 10. But 8 and 2 multiply to get 16, and they add to get 10. So what this had to come from was x plus 8 times x plus 2. And the nice thing I could do is I could double check my answer. That's x squared plus 2x plus 8x, which those x's together would add to be 10x, and 8 times 2 is 16. So again, we're always looking what adds to get this middle number and what multiplies to get here. So now we have another one. So what multiplies to get 16 but adds to get 8? Well, we already know it's not 8 and 2 because those they add to get 10. But 4 times 4 is 16 and 4 plus 4 is 8. So that's what it came from, was x plus 4 times x plus 4. Again, 4 plus 4 add to get 8, that's why we use them, and they multiply to get 16. Okay, what multiplies to get 6 but adds to get 5? Well, sometimes if you're a little stumped, I kind of just make all my list of what multiplies to get 6. Well, 1 times 6 does, and 2 times 3. Which of those would add to get 5? Well, 2 and 3 add to get 5, so that's what it came from, was x plus 2 times x plus 3. That's our factoring. What were the parentheses that started it? Let's do a few more examples. Multiplies to get 20, but adds to get 12. Well, multiplies to get 20 is 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. So then I look, which of those adds to get 12? The 2 and the 10 add to get 12. So that's what it came from, was x plus 2 times x plus 10. Those of you who did the diamond worksheet are going to realize why we did those diamonds. It's the same thing as figuring this out. What multiplies to get 12 but adds to get 7? Well, 12 would be 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. Which set of those add to get 7? The 3 times 4 do, so then it's x plus 3 times x plus 4. Now here's where we start to get tricky, when I have negatives involved. If they multiply to get a negative, it means one of the numbers has to be negative and one has to be positive. So I'm still thinking of what multiplies to get 16, which would be 1 and 16, and 2 and 8, and 4 and 4. Now here though, one of them is negative. I know that because it multiplies to get a negative. I also know that the higher of them are negative because they add to make a negative. So it would be like this. Now I think which set of those gives me -6 when I add it? And it appears to be this one right here. So that means it's x plus 2 times x minus 8. Or x plus -8 would be just fine. Okay, let's try that again. I know they multiply to get a negative, so that means one is negative and one is positive. So to get 24, I just think, well, that's 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. Then I look that they add to make a positive. Well, if these two sets add to make a positive, it means the higher of the values must be positive, making the lower ones negative. So I think which of those then would add to get +2? And it looks like it's these ones. So that means it came from x minus 4 times x plus 6. Okay? Now with something slightly different, I see they multiply to make a positive, excuse me, but add to make a negative. That means they both must be negative, because if they multiply to be a positive but yet add to be a negative, they both have to be negative to get that negative value here. So to get 8, it's 1 and 8, 2 and 4. I think that's it to get 8, right? So which of those, because they would both have to be positive, would give me -6? It's this 2 and 4. So here it is x minus 2 times x minus 4. Last one, this seems to be the one that throws everybody off, is they multiply to get a -30, which again means one of them has to be negative, and they add to get a +1, because there's no number there, so the number I could place in front of x to keep the value the same would be 1. So let's think of 30. It would be 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, can't do 4, 5 and 6. They add to make a positive, so that tells us the larger of the numbers are positive. And when I say the larger, like 30 is larger than 1 and 15 is larger than 2. So these must be my negatives. And which then would combine to give me a +1. I think it's down here. So that would be x minus 5, sorry, I'm going off the paper there, times x plus 6. So when doing these problems, you don't have to make this list if you can see them quickly on your own. But if you need to, it helps. So to recap, they always add to make the middle number. So I have x squared plus something times x plus something. They always add to get this number, multiply to get this. If I know that this is negative, it means I have one negative and one positive. So it's kind of, we really have to think of our number for x with integers to solve these.